Welcome in. Lake Lewis does a great job covering the NFL. Washington Redskins, great follow on Twitter at Lake Lewis. Also, PFW writers as well, PFWA writers as well. Kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on this Wednesday. What's going on, pal?
Hey, what's going on, Q? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Just, when I hear these new hires, and is it a new hire or is it just a recycling job? It's just the NFL seems to be stuck in, if they had a coaching convention, it would be 100 coaches at that convention every year, and it'd be the same 100 coaches, and they just recycle each other. You get fired from two jobs, and you get hired for another job. That's just not the world we live in, I guess.
It's like when businesses keep going to, we call them the Chamber of Commerce meetings around here, which do a great job for local businesses, but I always believe you see the same people all the time, and they're just showing up for the free cheese and wine. So
yeah, it's just are you
the same familiar faces, right? There's no one new to network with.
Right, and it's not. I'm not saying that Haley's bad, but he was fired, and he was fired a couple times. So I'm just, after a while, it starts to be old news.
But let me ask you something: was he fired because of the play calling, or fired because he just did not see eye to eye with the franchise quarterback, or a little bit of both?
Listen, on your resume, it has all the great things that Rich Quinones has done over his career. On your resume, if it says that you were fired by ESPN in Jersey, bottom line is when you go meet with someone that's going to hire you going forward, they will have seen that, and they will have asked the same question. What happened there? The bottom line is he was let go. And if it was because of Ben Roethlisberger or Mike Tomlin or philosophical differences, they didn't want him in Pittsburgh. Now Cleveland does. And all I'm saying is if you're Cleveland, you owe it to your fan base to do your due diligence. And I'm not saying they didn't and they came up with Haley as the best option, but I kind of don't know if they did. And I feel like, me personally, they didn't. Because there's a lot of guys out there that are looking for opportunities, and if they're given opportunities, you may see these quantum leaps by teams immediately. I look at the team right there in that market, the Philadelphia Eagles, and they have some coaches on that roster in their building that were former pro players, and they see things a little differently. But they also have some young upstart guys that needed an opportunity, and not as a quality control guy. There's someone as a position coach, someone that can show what they can do. Philip Daniels is a perfect example of that. He's a guy that played, 16 years in the league, knows his stuff, and he was given an opportunity. What's one of the better units in the NFL right now?
Right.
Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. So all I'm saying is not to be on the soapbox, but I just get tired of hearing the same names recycled, and if it's not the same coaching name, it's a family name. You see these coordinators that are kids of former NFL coaches or whatever.
Yep.
It's just not a good look, if you ask me.
Hey, Belichick's got his kids on his staff.
And someone's going to say, well, deservingly so, because their father might be the greatest coach of all time. No, not necessarily. If we followed in our parents' footsteps of everything we did, we may not be where we are today. Let's just say that.
No, I would be let's just say I would be.
Right now.
I wouldn't be on the air. I'd probably be I'd be a cop that drinks way too much bourbon on Sundays. That's probably what I would have been. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I would have been proud of that as well.
Of course.
I'm curious too. It's funny because you mentioned Haley. Jackson gives up all the his roles as a coordinator and a play caller, which is kind of weird because wasn't the reason he was hired is because he's that offensive mind and he's the play caller, and which tells me, by the way, they're going to draft a quarterback.
Well, I was just about to say that. You just took the words right out of my mouth. Hugh Jackson, more than anything else, even before coordinator, is a quarterbacks coach. He's a guy that really helps quarterbacks, and I think by bringing in Haley, what they're going to do is allow Jackson to be a figurehead, for the team as a whole, a coach, kind of what Gruden was here until obviously last year he called the plays, but he's known as a quarterbacks guru as well. And I think, by them bringing in Haley in Cleveland, now Hugh Jackson not only can just be the coach, but he can kind of monitor the quarterbacks a little bit more. And I agree with you. This move has quarterback written all over it. which they'll use, with their first pick, if you ask me.
What surprised you more? What surprised you more Sunday in the Eagles-Vikings game? The fact that the defense has just been stout in the first two playoff games and they dominated Minnesota in which the fashion that they dominated them, or the performance by Nick Foles?
As great as Nick Foles looked the other night, you can't take that away from that kid. He had a career game.
Agree.
In a career moment. He needed that game at that time, and he delivered. That's why they're going to Minnesota. But their defense has just been clobbering teams. It hasn't even been competitive. I think they would have blown out, Atlanta by more had they probably let Foles open it up the way he did on Sunday. I think their defense has been that good, and it's just going to be interesting. I'm really curious to see what kind of performance they can put together against New England and Tom Brady, because as we saw against Jacksonville, once New England figured out some things with Jacksonville, they just went right through them. So that's going to be a nice, compelling matchup in the Super Bowl.
I thought Jacksonville had New England right where they wanted them. They had the lead. They had the ball late, even though they knew they were going to get the ball to start the second half. And I wavered.
What happened? But didn't we talk about this last week?
You got to be aggressive.
That team. Yeah. So the youth of the team caught up to them, too. They see, when you're young and you're arrogant, you feel like you can conquer all. But what happens when you start to see the tide turning and you see momentum changing? They just couldn't stop the avalanche of Tom Brady in New England. They couldn't stop it. And I started to see some of the young guys looking around like, so this is what it's like coming up.
Well, even the Miles Jack play. Listen, I thought it was a quick whistle, but Amendola lost him in coverage, and he played out of position. And Brady, that's what they do. They're veterans. Mm-hmm. You got a Hall of Fame quarterback. He took advantage of it. But kind of to your point where I agree what you're saying, but where I'll disagree a little bit is late in the first half, they still showed you, Marone and Jacksonville let the world know we still don't trust Bortles, right? Run. And then they punt the ball late on the other side of 2 minutes when the play clock still has 18 seconds. You're giving you're just giving them, whether it's a couple extra seconds, you're still giving them more time. And the last thing any team can give New England, you give Tom Brady 5 minutes, it's almost like you're giving him 4 weeks.
You know what it looked like? It reminded me of the Super Bowl from last year, where everything in the first half of that game with Atlanta, their defense was flying around, they were stopping them, but it just seemed like once New England figured out a couple things, they just kept going back to it. That slant pattern over the middle of the field, there were pick plays. Let's call it what it is, but everyone does it now, so it's not like New England's getting away with this. But you started to see that they knew what would work for them against Jacksonville's defense, and the strength of Jacksonville's defense is up front. So everything was even quicker delivery. It was almost running plays, those little bubble screens, those little dump offs. It became almost a running game for New England that started to work. And the thing that impressed me the most about this is that they did this without Gronk. He went out early in the game, took the big hit, and I thought it was over. I'll be honest with you. When Jacksonville went up 14-3,
I never did.
Gronk got hurt. I just had this feeling that maybe these young guys are really gonna put their foot on New England, and as journalists, all these little side notes start popping up in my head, and I'm thinking, if New England loses this game, there are going to be people in New England crying foul that they got rid of a young guy that could lead them over the next 10, 15
Jimmy
years.
Garoppolo,
Yeah, for a 40-year-old who could have been his swan song.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you saw what Brady does, and that's why he's the GOAT.
Yeah, and I still had Jacksonville winning the game, but again, you're right. Brady is he's an all-time great. I'll ask you the resident Redskins question, and then if we have a couple minutes on the NBA. Well, you know what? Because we get a bunch of Skins fans that tune in, so one of the texters actually wants to know what's your thoughts on Mason Rudolph?
I'm hearing a lot of good stuff about Mason Rudolph, and seen him a couple times, and he's a big, strong quarterback. A 6'5", 230-pound guy, and he did some good stuff at Oklahoma State. But is he, for their pick at 13, is he one of the top 13 available players? And even if you're going to go quarterbacks, at that point, he clearly will be there on the board unless he does some dynamic stuff. Senior Bowl obviously going on right now, and then at the combine or whatever. But I like him. I'm not sure about him. I think. Well, honestly, though, Q, there's not a quarterback in this year's draft that doesn't have question marks.
I agree 100%.
They all have big question marks. So it just depends on the fit of the team. One thing I do know, and I can say this safely, is that Jay Gruden's a heck of a coach when it comes to quarterbacks. So whoever they draft's going to get a really good guy to lead him into his pro career. It's up to that player to put the work in.
All right, I know we got a couple minutes left. Again, Lake Lewis joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. A couple quickies on the NBA. Are the Cavs about to implode, or is this everyone calm down, relax, it's just a skid, come talk to me in the spring?
No, I think this is a little different. I think this one, I wouldn't go as far as saying imploding, but they're not going to hit that switch that they've hit the last, 4 or 5 years. It's just not going to happen this year.
I want you to say that again. I want you to say that again because I have a stubborn listening audience because I said the same thing last year, and then what did they do? They hit the switch.
They did. They hit the switch. They've done it the last 4 or 5 years. This isn't going to be that year, and I'm going to give you a reason why they're not going to hit that switch. Because they hit that switch over the last 4 years because they had a guy named Kyrie Irving who could get them buckets whenever he needed to. You saw it in the finals. I mean, this is a guy that could drop 40 on you on a night's notice if he felt like he needed to, and
take
if
over
he
the
felt
game,
like he would, and if he felt like he'd be allowed to. There's a big difference with that. So now you don't have that kind of offensive firepower now in one individual. Isaiah Thomas he's an all-star, but he's a different type of player.
Oh, nowhere on the level of Kyrie around the basket.
Nowhere near. And on top of that, he's not a guy. He's not a pass-first guy either. And Kyrie, say what you want about his offensive prowess. I mean, he also could set up guys. He could do whatever he wanted on the court, as we see in Boston. But I think that Cleveland might be in trouble this year. I think that the Eastern Conference is significantly, closer to them as far as a talent level. Do I think that right now they're the best team in the East? I don't. I think it's Boston. I think Boston has proven that. And I think that Cleveland, as an older team, when they play Boston in the playoffs, you might see that age show up even more because now you're talking about a series that more than likely will go 6 or 7, and you'll see if Cleveland has the wherewithal and firepower to be able to match a young Boston team that really believes they're good. So I don't think Cleveland hits the switch this year. I mean, you're talking about a 52 win team at most, and they're probably going to be a 4 seed, a 3 or a 4 seed. They're going to have to earn it if they're going to get back to get beat down by Golden State.
Well, that's true. And I listen, I agree with everything you're saying. I'll say this in closing, though, to kind of put a bow on everything. Your point about sometimes teams get old, I kind of started the show with that. You get the sense when a franchise, there's so many playoff games, it was documented with the Bad Boys years ago, but the Patriots are going to go through it. The Yankees went through it. Sometimes the team just gets old and that fading superstar, still an all-time great in the twilight of his career, he just can't carry them anymore. He just can't.
No. And teams are ganging up on LeBron to make sure that he can't carry them. And Cleveland clearly, Q, you know this, they have to make a trade. I mean, they're going to have to use Brooklyn's pick or something. They're going to have to, as currently constructed, if everyone's healthy and playing their A game, they still have no shot to beat Golden State.
Nope.
And I don't think LeBron's planning to be a runner-up for anybody.
No.
So they're going to have to make a big trade in order to get people excited, because if not currently constructed, I don't think they beat Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Nope. I agree with that one, my friend. All right, listen, great stuff as always. I'm up against it. Next week, we'll dive into the Super Bowl. I'll give you at least a week to do your due diligence, right? Because, remember back in the day, by the way, when they didn't have the week off?
Yeah, I do. I kind of like the, I think the 2-week setup has always been the best setup because it builds up the anticipation. But I do think 1 week is better for the players just to, just to go, because, the last thing you want to do is wait 2 weeks and play a championship game. It's just so many things that can come up, distractions, and you may lose that edge you had when you ran off the field, for your conference championship game, ready to go try to get that Super Bowl.
That's right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
All right, listen, have a good week. Enjoy it. We will talk next week. Always appreciate a couple moments, bud.
My pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Okay. All right, you got to be well. Lake Lewis joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.